The Sizzlers massacre was a tragic event that left families of the victims wounded to date. In 2003, 10 gay men were brutally attacked by Adam Roy Woest and Trevor Woest. 9 of them died and 1 survived. Author Nicole Engelbrecht's book Sizzlers details what happened on that fateful day. She talks to Quinton Taylor, the sole survivor who was badly wounded, played a crucial role in identifying the perpetrators of what will go down in history as one of the worst mass murders in South Africa. Nicole joins us now virtually for more. A very good morning to you, Nicole. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you too.
First of all, what inspired you to write a book about the tragic events that occurred at Sizzlers in 2003? Could it be the fact that someone was granted parole and a mass murderer asking to be freed?
So really, my book that I wrote in 2022, which was about a separate case, really got me involved in the parole system and understanding the failings, in that system. And I wanted my next book to be about really something that was happening in the parole system. And Sizzlers, I'd had the privilege of getting to know a couple of the people, members of the family and the survivor, Quinton Taylor, just through my podcast. And I decided that this was a story that most definitely needed to be told, especially with Adam Woest now being up for parole.
And how did you go about researching and gathering information for this book? I mean, given the sensitivity of what happened about 2 decades ago.
Look, I've been really lucky to have people approach me through my podcast. Many people surrounding this case have actually approached me with information in the past.
Okay.
When it came to writing the book, I had quite a few sources that I could draw on. And then, of course, it was getting hold of the detective to make sure I understood the SABC side of this, and then speaking to people within the Department of Correctional Services, and most importantly, the family members of the deceased victims and the survivor, Quinton Taylor. But certainly, with it being so many years having passed, it was very difficult to get hold of quite a few of these people.
Do you want to talk to us about the process of interviewing the sources and the sole survivor, of course, for this book?
So really, when you're doing interviews around subject matter like this, it needs to be done really sensitively, because it doesn't matter that more than 20 years has passed. For many of these individuals, these wounds are still very fresh. And with Adam Woest having sort of just come up for parole again, everything has been renewed for these people. So it really has to be a very sensitive process where you allow the people that you're interviewing to use their own process and come to you with information in ways that suit them and how they've grieved and how they've dealt with their trauma. So I'm always very open to, when I'm interviewing, I don't foist my own manner of interviewing upon these people. If the interviewees want to do voice notes, they can. If they want to write down the information, they can. Whatever really is most comfortable and least traumatizing for them is what I did. So it was really different with everyone.
And in what ways do you think the story of the Sizzlers massacre is important or even relevant today?
There are so many layers to this case that really, and some of them I only really started realizing when I was writing the book and researching. Of course, most prominently is the education for the public on our parole system and understanding how our parole system failings at the moment are letting the public as well as offenders down. That's one very important layer. And then I really wanted to humanize these victims for the public, because although many people may not even know about this case, I think these victims represent a sort of portion of victims of violent crime in South Africa that are often looked away from because it involves matters that we often don't like to speak about, such as sex work. Many of these men were also members of the LGBTQ plus community. So those were all layers that I wanted to delve into and did my best to in the book. But most importantly, just humanizing these victims as the loved brothers, sons, partners that they were to the people that lost them.
Yeah, and in as much as the book is focusing on parole and the issues around parole, but the bigger focus, I suppose, is the issue of hate crime. What is it that you've uncovered in terms of hate crime in South Africa, and what kind of challenges did you face in writing this book, particularly recounting such a horrific event?
I think we've come a very far way, from 2003 to now in certain ways in combating sort of illogical hatred such as homophobia and perhaps looking down. We understand the sex work industry a little bit better. But really what I found in interviewing, I had to, of course, understand this lived experience because it's not my lived experience. So I did interview many members of the queer community. And I think what I discovered was, although on the surface we think that our constitution does protect the dignity and rights of queer people in South Africa, under the surface that is often very different because homophobia still runs rife in many places, and certainly in 2003 it was a huge issue. And that was an important experience for me to read about, and also to see how some of these families struggled within themselves to come to terms with the fact that, for many of them, they found out that their loved ones were murdered and that they had been in the sex trade and that they had perhaps been gay all at the same time. So that was really enlightening, I must say.
Right. Nicole, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's quite interesting to see that in as much as you are focusing on the facts of this horrendous crime, but you shied away from sensationalism given the sensitivities of this case. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yes, that's really important to me. I do try to do that in all of the true crime content that I create. I don't think it serves anyone to focus on these sensational things, Okay. So we focus on
All right, unfortunately we're out of time, Nicole, but lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Author and podcaster Nicole Engelbrecht talking to us about her book, Sizzlers, a gripping crime story about 10 gay men who were brutally attacked at Sizzlers.